Today, I want to talk to you about invasive species, what they are, how they impact our lives, as well as different methods that we can use to help mitigate their harmful effects. But first, we'll start off with an example of a healthy system. This is a diverse plant community. There are many species here, all of which can actually be found here in Southwest Ohio, that have evolved together for thousands of years. With this coevolution, they've adapted to balance each other out. These balanced plant communities can then form the foundation of an ecosystem, providing support to different wildlife. This wildlife that relies on these plants for different food and habitats can then form a healthy ecosystem that supports humans as well. For example, many of our pharmaceuticals are derived from things like plant compounds. Pollinators that rely on healthy ecosystems in order to function are also supporting and essential to our agricultural systems. Healthy ecosystems also clean our water, with plant roots acting as filtration systems that also prevent runoff and erosion into our local waterways. You also get a sense of enjoyment when you go outside and use our natural areas for recreation, either through hunting, hiking, or fishing. But sometimes, new species are introduced into a system that can become problematic. These are called invasive species. This plant, Lesser celandine, is my study species. It's also an invasive, especially here in Oxford, Ohio. There's a two-part definition to what an invasive species is. The first is that it's native to an area. So Lesser celandine, for example, is a European species that was brought over to the United States. The second part is that it causes some sort of harm to the local environment or community. With invasive plants, this is typically in the form of competition for light, nutrients, or other resources. So when this plant invades a system, our native plants aren't adapted to fight it off. And this means that Lesser celandine can become overabundant and take over areas, preventing our native plants from thriving. This causes an imbalance in that ecosystem. So if you were to balance the entire Pyramid of Giza just on a toothpick, you may be fine for a little bit, but at the slightest disruption, your entire system will crumble. So what can we do about invasive species? You may be thinking, well, why don't we just get rid of them all? If you get rid of the invasive species, you get rid of all of the problems that they're causing as well. There are a couple issues with this approach. It costs a lot of time and a lot of money to eradicate invasive species entirely from systems. Some of these systems are so heavily invaded that it would be nearly impossible to get rid of every single individual. Additionally, in these heavily invaded systems, the native plant populations have declined to the point where even when you remove invasives, the native plants can't recover. So this requires replanting in addition to eradication of the invasives, which costs more time and more money. A different approach is to target the dispersal of these plants to new areas. If we target the dispersal, that means that we prevent our healthy ecosystems from becoming degraded in the first place. In order to do this, we have to understand how these species are dispersing to new areas. So many plant species, for example, were brought over for use as ornamentals, so in gardens or your backyard. But somehow, these plants are getting from our backyards into our local forests and taking over. The exact mechanism by which this happens isn't well known. That's where my research comes into play. So I study how Lesser celandine is invading new areas and dispersing. One hypothesis is that they may be spreading through human recreation in our footwear. If you've ever gone outside on a rainy day, you know how easily mud and other debris gets caught up in your shoes. In this way, seeds from Lesser celandine may be carried to new areas, getting caught up in the treads of your boots as you're walking along. Just like humans and our boots, deer hooves have treads in them, just like us, that may be picking up this plant debris and bringing it to new areas. But you don't have to do a master's thesis in order to help with the problem of invasive species. Opting to plant native species in your gardens as opposed to exotics means that the exotics can't escape and become invasive in the first place. This also has a second added benefit of helping the pollinator populations that rely on these native plants. Participating in volunteer events, like remediations or habitat restorations, means that we're reducing the number of invasives in an area, which means less plants are going to be dispersing to new areas. Again, this helps our native plant populations recover, gives them a little bit more light and nutrients to work with. Using things like boot brush stations at trailheads is a great way to get rid of unwanted hitchhikers as you're hiking from area to area. And lastly, but most importantly, observing the world around you is essential to mitigating the invasion problem. If we catch these invasions early on, it means that we can catch them before they start creating this problem. This is the cheapest and easiest way to eradicate invasive species. We may not be able to help prevent these invasions in heavily invaded areas that are kind of past the point of no return, but we can prevent our healthy ecosystems from becoming degraded in the first place, keeping intact all of those benefits to wildlife as well as humans. Thank you.